Chris Mackowski of Emerging Civil War. I'm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, on the east side of town at Richard Ewell's headquarters. Kind of a forgotten spot here on the corner of Hanover and 6th Streets. Busy intersection here, but to get us oriented, Gettysburg is off in that direction. If we were to head off that direction, it would take us to East Cemetery Hill. Culp's Hill is more off in that direction, and Benner's Hill is in that direction behind me. And here Richard Ewell sort of orchestrated in a rather hands-off fashion the assaults that took place throughout the day on the 2nd and the 3rd of July 1864. But a lot of people wonder, well, what happened if Stonewall Jackson had been here and not Richard Ewell? And people love to wonder kind of if Jackson survived his wounding at Chancellorsville. They like to plop him here down on the Gettysburg battlefield and assume he goes and he takes Culp's Hill or takes East Cemetery Hill, rolls on down to Washington, captures the capital of the United States, wins the war, and things go on for the Confederacy. It's a fabulous bit of, there's a little local redneck driving by. It's a fabulous bit of lost cause pornography. People love that scenario, but if we take a look at what actually happened here at Gettysburg, we can kind of see that Richard Ewell made some decisions very similar to what Jackson had a record of doing as well. The other thing is, you know, to get Jackson from Chancellorsville to Gettysburg, that's a 2-month period. So many things happen that we can't realistically even get him here onto this field. We talked some about some of that in a previous video. We might as well ask, what if James Longstreet had been at the North Anna River so that Robert E. Lee could strike a blow, so that he had a dependable subordinate that he could count on? So much happens between Longstreet's wounding in the wilderness and the Battle of North Anna. There's just no way you can really reasonably extrapolate that over the course of those 3 weeks. And here we've got 2 months of action that we would want to try to extrapolate to somehow get Jackson to this spot, leading assaults on the evening of July 1st, taking that hill if practicable. So what we're going to do here is talk a little bit about some of the things that actually did happen and why Ewell made decisions very similar to what Jackson probably would have done as well, based on Jackson's own record. Now, through the magic of technology, I'm going to teleport myself up here to Benner's Hill because I'm far away from the traffic and the rednecks driving by honking their horns, and because this is really kind of a key part to our story. You can see Guns of Latimer's battery behind me. Not much to see from here today because the corn is so high. I feel like I could be back in Illinois or Indiana or Iowa. Although actually I've never been to Iowa, but I did live in Illinois for a while. In any event, it obstructs our view, but off in that direction would be East Cemetery Hill. Culp's Hill is going to be off in that direction, screened by those trees. You can actually see it pretty well in the winter when the trees are down. And here, Latimer's men are going to be engaged in an artillery duel on the 2nd of July with Federal cannoneers off on East Cemetery Hill and on Culp's Hill. But our story here actually focuses on July 1st, when Richard Ewell comes to this spot to do some in-person reconnaissance. So let's recap the action of July 1st, 1863. We know that A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps opens the party on the west side of town along the Cashtown Pike, and then Richard Ewell's 2nd Corps makes an appearance on the north end of the battlefield, ultimately causing the Federal position to collapse in through town, where they begin to reform on East Cemetery Hill. From where I'm at, that's off in that direction right there, several hundred yards away. And as the Federals are streaming back toward their fallback position, Ewell rides into town to see what's going on, and he begins to assess the situation. And as he talks to subordinates and comes up with a plan to push forward, he suddenly has a courier ride up to him that comes from one of his brigade commanders, Extra Billy Smith. Smith is the governor-elect of Virginia. He'd been governor once already, so he's somebody that, even though he's only a brigadier general, you want to pay attention to, particularly since Ewell is a Virginian, as is Smith's brigade commander, Jubal Early, who's one of Ewell's division commanders. And as Ewell and Early talk, and they get this courier, the courier says, hey, we see some Yankees showing up on our left flank. And so Early's like, oh my gosh, now what? He doesn't really believe him, but of course he defers to Smith. And so Early and Ewell come riding out here onto Benner's Hill, onto the ridgeline here somewhere, and they take a look off into that direction toward the east, and they don't see anything. It's like, see, I told you it was a false alarm, the bad old man says. And Ewell's like, okay, fine. But in fact, Smith had seen a credible threat. The lead brigade of Alpheus Williams' 12th Corps Division shows up down here, taking an old Revolutionary War era trail through the woods, starts deploying, getting ready for an assault on this position, and then they're ordered to pull back as Slocum continues his advance in toward Gettysburg. And so they're there for like 15 minutes, they show up, and then they vanish. And so they're there long enough for Smith to see them. In fact, there are 12th Corps officers who see Early and Ewell up here. But Early and Ewell don't see any of those 12th Corps guys. And so they think it's just a phantom, but to be sure, Early's going to leave Extra Billy Smith's brigade posted here on the flank, as well as John Brown Gordon's in support, before they get ready to push forward. Now, Ewell actually wants them at first to try to get East Cemetery Hill. The Federals were falling back, keep up the momentum, keep up the push. But Early demurs. He's like, oh, my men are so fought out. Oh, I can't do it. Blah, 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 bellyache, bellyache, bellyache. And instead, he says, well, have Rhodes do it. Well, Rhodes' division just gets hammered on July 1st. They're in no condition. They sustain thousands of casualties compared to only about 500 casualties in Early's division. So then they're like, well, how about let's have Edward Allegheny Johnson do it? And Johnson at that time rides in and he can do it. Johnson can't do it. His men are on the far side of Gettysburg, coming down the Cashtown Pike, caught in a huge traffic jam over there. They can't even get to this side of the battlefield. By the time they finally do, Federals have occupied Culp's Hill. So that's the context, and people always kind of complain about Dick Ewell not taking Culp's Hill if practicable. Now, that phrase never actually appears until Robert E. Lee writes it in January of 1864, 6 months after the battle, and it's his second written report. A lot of lost cause mythology hinges on that phrase, a phrase that Lee may not have actually even used in the course of the battle. Lee always wanted to have his subordinates exercise some sort of independent judgment. He trusted them to do that. And so Ewell, really, as he's trying to look at attacking this position, has to respond to a credible position on his flank, or credible threat on his flank. Stonewall Jackson would have done the same thing. Nobody's going to go forward on a full frontal attack without making sure that your flanks are secure. I mean, that was a Stonewall Jackson signature move, attack the flanks. So, of course, throughout the war, he has several opportunities where he has to check his flanks to make sure. In fact, it's at Chancellorsville on a reconnaissance mission of his own where he is shot by his own men. So it makes perfect sense that he would be doing a reconnaissance here if he had a similar sort of report that Early got. Now, the one thing I will say, that if Stonewall Jackson had been here, if Jubal Early said, I don't know, blah, 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 complain, Jackson would have said, either execute that order or you're under arrest and I'll find someone who'll do it. And we would have seen the ascension of John Brown Gordon happen a lot sooner as a result. So there's an instance where I think that Jackson's presence would have made a difference because Ewell deferred to Early. In fact, he does that several times throughout the war. And I don't think Jackson would have had any of that nonsense. He had a long history of arresting people who didn't follow orders to the letter. But aside from that, I think Ewell does all the sorts of things that Jackson himself would have done had he been here. The idea that Jackson would have led an attack through these fields and against Culp's Hill, against East Cemetery Hill, capturing the Confederates, driving them off, pushing all the way to Washington, D.C., capturing the Capitol, throwing Lincoln in jail, getting European recognition, winning the war. No, none of that would have happened. All that would have happened was that the Federals would have gotten driven off that and fallen back to the prepared defenses that Meade had at Pipe Creek. So Gettysburg would have been one more in a series, just like the Second Battle of Winchester, one more in a series of battles in this campaign that would have finally culminated someplace other than Gettysburg, rather than here. What fascinates me about the idea is, what if Jackson was at Gettysburg, is that so many people want to put him here, as though they want to rewrite history for whatever reason. And that's what fascinates me, not so much as what would have happened, because we can't answer that question. We do know that Ewell made some rational, reasonable decisions, very similar to the sorts of decisions Jackson himself had made earlier in the war. Ewell had been trained by Jackson. That all makes a lot of sense. But to plop Jackson here in Ewell's position is to really then engage in what I call lost cause porn. We want something to happen that was so fabulously different than what actually happened, regardless of what the facts on the ground might suggest. So to point you to some additional resources, I've written about this question on the Emerging Civil War blog. My colleague Chris White, our chief historian, has written about it in our Great What Ifs of the American Civil War book, and he and I have also written about it in our our battle on the first day at Gettysburg, Fight Like the Devil. So you can find additional information and analysis there. So ponder that question. What if Jackson had been here? But ponder your assumptions about that question and really kind of think about, why is it people really want that to happen in the first place? For Emerging Civil War, I'm Chris Mackowski. Thanks for being with me here at Gettysburg National Military Park. We'll see you online and on the battlefield.